The dark cosmos. Stay cosmic.
Something Has Awakened Underneath Our City by Tiana Petkovska. This is Cybill Blake, a private investigator at Blake Investigative Services Company. For full disclosure, I must preface that the status of my license is currently under examination by the local licensing authorities, and has been such as of December 3rd, 1989. This recording is dated December 15th, 1989. It is intended to preserve what little is still known of the catastrophic events that took place in November of the same year in the city of Redacted, Massachusetts. All right, here it goes. The truth. It all started back in September. I was contacted by a company whose business primarily dealt with art. Buying and selling, that is. At first, naturally, I thought this was going to be a job about stolen artwork. Easy, I thought to myself. Track down the thief using my back channels and circumvent the boys in blue to get the spoils back to the client quickly, sans legal action or any additional fuss. But man, was I wrong. There were warning signs about how difficult it was going to get from the start that I shouldn't have ignored. And connections that I should have made much earlier than I did. For instance, on the day of my first face-to-face appointment with a representative of the company, I got information via the telephone on a wanted fugitive that shouldn't have been engaged with in any way. I didn't think anything of it at the time, since those kinds of particulars weren't an interest of mine. They were merely a little aid my former colleagues from the Redacted PD would send over to me so that I could stay out of trouble. I'm not a bounty hunter. I don't get my hands dirty like that. I'm more of the catching others red-handed variety. Cheaters, thieves, frauds, and con men. Those bastards are my line of business.
I'm telling you, Cybill, stay out of this.
You don't have to tell me twice, Joey.
This guy's a real piece of work. Used to be some sort of scientist. I forget the name. European. One of them smart types, so he would be peaceful, you would think. But nah. Captain says that he'd been running a cult. They call them the Depths Diviners. Mickey was part of the team that raided the house they were huddled in for months. Nasty stuff, Cybill. Mangled bodies, some half buried in the ground, others in the walls. From the state of him, they couldn't figure out if he was doing black magic or some kind of experiment down in the basement. The mangled bodies weren't even the most shocking discovery. He escaped with dozens of his followers before the team got there, though. Hiding somewhere in the city limits, they think. The feds are gonna get involved.
Whoa. Why the heads up then, Joey? Seems like everything has been covered if the big guns are getting involved.
I heard that some people outside of the law might be trying to find him, too. I'm not sure why, but you never know whose toes he might have stepped on. Don't just stupidly say yes to a paycheck over the next few weeks, yeah?
Joey must have had a gut feeling that I'd get super deep in this damn situation, because he usually didn't call if something seemed shady. He would normally get the information to me through one of his rats on the street because he didn't want anyone from the old precinct to know that he'd been talking to me. I'd made enough enemies there before I handed in my badge and pistol for good. Joey and Mickey were the only two cops who still wanted to have anything to do with me from my former life as a detective. Or a real detective, as that SOB Mickey used to say. As soon as I hung up the telephone, feeling my shoulders tensing up a bit and my jaw clenching, there was a knock on my door before I could relax. It was my noon appointment, the representative from the art business. She wasn't what I expected, nor who I had spoken to over the telephone a week prior. If I didn't know any better, I would have said she was some kind of aristocracy, from her attitude down to the clothes she was wearing. Really stuck up, but was really pretty too. She walked in with an elegant stride and shook my hand firmly. then took a step back to look around and find a seat. Her coat was some kind of sleek wool that she wouldn't even dare put down. One look at my dusty office and my old blazer with mustard stains, and I could already tell she hated being here. By the state of my person, she had decided that she didn't trust me. I saw the disdain in the wrinkles of her scrunched-up nose while giving me the once-over with her gaze. However, it also seemed like she didn't have much of a choice and had to take what was being served. She spoke first, slowly but confidently. "My assistant explained the situation to you, I believe." He gave me the bare bones, Miss Bellini, Lucia Bellini. "Sounds Italian." She smirked politely to affirm my observation. "We'll be looking for some kind of stolen piece of art, if I understood correctly?" "Something like that. The object in question is an artifact that has been in the possession of my family for many generations. However, I wouldn't exactly call it an artwork, and I already know who stole it from my vault, Detective Blake." "Oh, you do you?" "Zoltan Varga, my lover." "Ex, you mean? Considering you think he stole—" "Detective." She interrupted me and then sighed heavily. That was clearly none of my business. "It's not photos of him in flagrante delicto that I'm after. I want him caught, brought back, and separated from the artifact that he managed to grab from under my nose." Miss Bellini looked away from me, her cold exterior cracking a little in the pause. There was a slight tremble in her tone when she continued. "He has the artifact. I'm certain of that, at least. It is an object that should have never, under any circumstances, seen the light of day. Not again. I worry for Zoltan. He's in too deep. He doesn't know what kind of power it holds and what it can do." "Say no more. All I needed was his name. I'll bring both back to you." She frowned at my comment, then stood up. I had been overly confident that I didn't need more information. Arrogant, even. "Detective, when I say that the artifact is dangerous, I mean it fully. It's not just an exaggeration. I lost my entire family because of it. If I hadn't hidden it in my vault once I arrived in America, there was a chance that I too would have gotten lost. Or maybe even the entire world if I had not been careful." "Christ, what is it? Not a weapon of mass destruction?" My nervous chuckle was met with her scornful look. I felt like a child getting ready to be scolded for commenting on things I was too young to understand. "It is an ancient device which I need back. Didn't you say so yourself that that was all you needed to know? And let me just add this. Zoltan won't try to fence the artifact. I'm afraid that he'll try to open it and use it. He has been obsessed with it since he learned about its existence. At first, he only read about it in my father's books, but then he tried. He opened it against my pleas. This must not happen again. The last time it did was catastrophic." Mysterious and succinct, Miss Bellini left my office quickly before I could ask her anything more, leaving behind only a faint flowery scent from her expensive perfume. I had agreed to the job foolishly, against Joey's advice. The mystery of the strange triangle formed by this woman, this man, and this artifact had set its grip on me. I needed to know what it was all about. And, more importantly, I needed the fat paycheck I was promised for a job well done. My dusty office didn't pay for itself. Neither did Scotch. I plopped down in my chair and started flipping through my contacts. Varga, I thought. Strange name. The kind you would remember when you would hear it. Foreign, probably Hungarian. hoping to find out more about this man who stole the artifact from a vault for which I'm sure no expenses were spared to keep secure, I turned to an old buddy of mine. He owed me a big favor. He used to be the cultural attaché in the Hungarian embassy and was a pretty nosy guy. There wasn't any dirt about anyone from his country that he didn't know about, or hadn't used against them at some point. That is, until I found some of his own and kept it as leverage if ever I should need it. Mr. Caroli, nice to hear your voice again.
Ah, you. What do you want?
Is that how you greet all of your friends? Or just the ones that know your dirty secrets?
I'm at work, in my office. Discretion is advised, Detective Blake. How may I assist you?
I'm looking for information on what I assume is a Hungarian national. Zoltán Varga. Ever heard that name?
Varga? Why would you ask about him?
Did I ask what you were doing in that cheap motel on the margins of our great city about a year ago?
Damn you, Blake. Yes, I know him. Or knew him, I should say. He's a theoretical physicist who came to the US for better academic opportunities. In fact, it was I who had to assist in procuring his visa. Some people back in my country said he was a genius. Others called him a madman. I thought, and still do, that he's a pervert.
Takes one to know one, Caroli, eh? I'm curious, though, why you would call him that. What else can you tell me about him? Be specific.
All I know is that wherever he goes, there is always some kind of scandal and drama that follows. He was practically driven out of Italy back in the 70s. For someone that deals with the theoretical, he sure likes to experiment a lot.
That's it? Come on, man. I need more details than that. Give me more of that juicy, scandalous gossip that you know I love. I sneered at him. One never knows what half-truth might be hiding in there, what clue might present itself to an attentive listener.
Well, there were a few rumors that he'd been experimenting with certain devices of unknown origin that caused a lot of damage to a village in Italy. When I was helping with the visa, I tried to find out more information. But there seemed to be nobody who could account for what had happened there. It was as if the village had completely disappeared from the face of the planet. The only ones that even remembered it was there were the people from the next village over. They spoke of an odd man that once passed through their peaceful community. By their descriptions, I just assumed they were talking about Varga.
Caroli kept going on and on about how Varga had left a string of unsolved murders in his wake. However, it seemed to me that most of that talk was conjecture based on very circumstantial, or dare I say, flimsy, evidence. The descriptions of the crime scenes were too surreally gruesome to have been true, and I've seen plenty of those in my life to account for what sounds like fiction and what like fact. Then again, there was a lot about artifacts and devices of strange origin that I heard repeated in Caroli's long and exhaustive speech about Varga. For someone who was really concerned with discretion, he sure had no problem exposing other people's dirty laundry to any prying ear.
You see, Detective Blake, the accounts about Varga from Italy always had him carrying a box with him that had some strange markings. Some even said that the box used to hum in a highly uncomfortable manner. Then some had said that there was always a beautiful woman on his side who looked like an aristocrat. Young, pretty, and stuck up.
Yeah, I think I know who that might have been. But are you sure she was there for the murders as well?
I'm only sure that that was what I've been told. The crime scenes looked like a black magic ritual gone wrong, or an experiment. The Italian detectives had no idea what they were dealing with.
A week or so after my talk with Caroli, I was still pretty far from getting to the bottom of this case. Joey had called me in the meantime to tell me all about the manhunt that the entire police force was implementing within the city limits. No luck in finding their main person of interest or any of his followers. The depths diviners sure gave them a lot of grief, and it didn't look like they could be found, much less stopped easily. Redacted was on the verge of mass hysteria. The media coverage didn't help the situation much. They were, in fact, fueling the madness with talk of entire warehouses filled with bodies that were mangled in such ways that it would have been impossible with the current laws of physics. The blame for every single crime and abominable violence fell on the cult, and everybody was on edge, thinking that they or their loved ones would end up their latest victim, or even sacrifice. In truth, nobody knew what the depths diviners were doing, nor what they were all about. The cult had kept all of its secrets nicely hidden between its members. Crazy stories kept going around the city. Rumors had begun to spread, and even Joey's rats had taken to hiding. No place was safe, they would say. Rifts would open up, swallowing people, sometimes completely, other times only partially, leaving torsos and heads half buried in concrete and steel. My associates were tougher, but they too were dwindling in numbers. Most of my back channels were closed for business and had fled the city, fearing that their own operations might get caught in the crossfire between the feds and the depths diviners. They also had a hard time believing the stories, much like myself. One day, while I was following up on a much-needed and hard-to-come-by lead from my main man Varga, I came across something that made me quickly change my mind about the rumors. The scoop on Varga had come from one of my associates, who will remain unnamed for his own security. He was part of the criminal underbelly of Redacted and had been working in a warehouse at the far end of the north side of the city, where most of the stories had placed the crazy and unnatural occurrences. His employers had rented the place to Varga, who had mischievously used Bellini's company to hide his identity. By this behavior, it was obvious that Varga wasn't afraid that she might have tracked him down. In fact, I would soon realize that there was very little that this man, this monster, really, feared. My associate, a man of about 40, beaten down by life and even more so by his own bad decisions, had burst into my office on the day, shaking and tearing up like a little child. I gave him a smoke, some Irish coffee, and a lot of eye rolls, as he proceeded to tell me how he came upon the information that Varga had set up camp at the warehouse. The account of my associate about what had been going on in the place was just as surreal as Caroli's descriptions, but almost too similar to be discounted. "Does he have the artifact?" I asked, and my associate squealed, shoving himself so deeply back into the chair that I thought he would simply disappear into it. Varga did have the artifact. It had taken center stage in the warehouse. It was being praised and used. "What do you mean, praised? Varga's not alone there? Who's with him? How many of them are there?" The man barely answered my questions, stammering, crying, and outright storming out, then coming back a few times. He only managed to tell me what he had seen. "Boss, oh my God, boss, I swear I saw a rift open right in the middle of the warehouse where we used to sit for our break." He whimpered. He stood up and started pacing. "A few of them, the freaks, those cultists or whatever they are, they just fell right through it, into nothing. Then suddenly, whoosh, it closed and trapped a few poor souls in the ground itself. And his goons, they just shot them, bang, in the head. Better that way. Their screams were just hellish, boss. I mean, they shoot horses, don't they?" These were the horrors that would torment him, and also me, eventually. "Don't go there, boss. Don't do it. Whatever they're paying, it ain't worth it. It ain't worth nothing," said he, then stormed out of my office and didn't come back again. A dire warning, I thought, yet made plans to get to the warehouse by the end of the night and to see what was what. This was when I finally connected the dots that my person of interest was the same lunatic that had tormented the city for the previous months. Varga was the leader of the Depths Diviners. Seems so obvious now. But I was completely sidetracked by my own arrogance. He was the mastermind behind an untouchable group of sadists. The puzzle pieces became more obvious and easier to put together to see the final image, or what I thought would be the final one. I was, naturally, getting way ahead of myself. I had yet to uncover what the artifact was and how it served the cult. I needed my damned paycheck. And I needed to appease my curiosity. I couldn't explain away the things happening in the city as mere rumors or crazy stories anymore. There was more to this. There was something awful afoot. Before I left to get to my car, the telephone rang. I stopped for a moment and let it ring, not sure if I wanted to answer when I was in such a hurry. But I did. I just had that detective gut feeling that it might be important.
Cybill.
Joe?
Cybill, for Christ's sakes, what did you do?
What did I do?
Who the hell did you talk to?
I didn't understand what Joey was saying, or what he was asking me about. It was barely making any sense.
The location of the cult has been discovered, and the military is getting involved now, Cybill. There's talk that this might become an international incident. All of us are being pulled from the case, and the city will be quarantined indefinitely.
International? Because of Varga?
No, because of you and your big mouth.
Holy moly, what did Caroli spill? What did Little Miss Sunshine get me involved in? My heart was pounding in my ears, but I was still determined to get to that damned warehouse and figure this thing out. The drive through the city should have been an omen of things to come. It was empty, and the thick November fog had settled heavily over everything. Deathly silent. Lonely barks were heard echoing here and there, then howling toward the dark and murky night sky. For a city of its size, redacted, sure seemed vacant that early in the evening. While it was cold already, the streets were never this barren. The fear of the Depths Diviners had driven everyone into hiding, in the safety of their homes, only to pick up where they had left off early in the morning in the fake shelter of the day. It took me more than half an hour to arrive at the warehouse from my office, even without traffic. The building was quite literally at the border where the city meets the imposing mountains and the wilderness. There was a long stretch of road with nothing but other warehouses on each side. As I was approaching the one where my associate used to work, I realized quickly that there wasn't any police there, nor the feds, or even the military, as Joey had suggested over the telephone. I gripped my steering and prepared myself for the worst. Since there wasn't any inconspicuous place to park in the vicinity of the spot that Varga overtook, I had to leave my car and proceed on foot. About half a mile from the warehouse, I had started to notice lights, heard chatter among people, and saw them moving around the building. I had my piece on me, but I doubted it would help me much since there were at least 50 people outside and God knows how many more inside. It was then that I heard a familiar voice coming from the exit of the warehouse.
You don't know what you're doing, Zoltan. You've already caused so much pain. If you do this, there will be no coming back from it. The rift must remain sealed, just as my ancestors were instructed by the visitors 500 years ago. You've already destroyed...
There was a distant thud and a yelp. She stopped speaking. When I saw her frame, I recognized it easily, even from a distance. That little brat Bellini. Why would she hire me if she knew where he was this whole time? I was furious, and I should have been scared, especially since I could see a few people carrying Bellini's body away. I didn't know if she was unconscious or already dead. But I couldn't take the chance and leave her with these savages if she was still alive. So I followed the men toward the back of the warehouse where they were taking her. The closer I got to the building, the more I began to realize that the chatter coming from inside wasn't people speaking to each other at all. The sound became clearer, yet I had more trouble deciphering what it actually was. It was more mechanical than organic, more repetitive than chaotic, artificial. The men that were taking Bellini away had turned around the corner of the structure and were out of sight. My breath shortened at the thought that my client might be dead. The rest of the people that were moving around the warehouse had already gone inside. I waited for a moment, crouched down under one of the very few windows, listening to the sound coming from a large inner room, and trying to comprehend what it could have originated from. Eventually, my curiosity got the better of me, and I just had to look, to peek inside and see what was going on there. The first thing that struck me was the figure of Varga looming over some kind of object that was raised on a small platform and connected with cables to several different devices of human origin. He was something straight out of a comic book. Tall, incredibly lean, pale as death itself, and with an intense gaze fixated on the devices surrounding the object. He was the only one on the platform next to it, and it looked like he was preparing the object and devices for something. Everyone in the warehouse was silent in eager anticipation. I glanced at the faces surrounding the platform, and for a moment I thought how ordinary all those people looked, in stark contrast to their leader. They were just like you and me. The object, or, as you might have guessed by now, Bellini's dangerous artifact, wasn't any larger than your basic television. Its design was minimal. I would even go as far as to say that it was elegant. It was a black box with strange markings and signs that looked alien, plastered all over. But there was little I could really discern from my vantage point, just that the inscriptions didn't look like anything I'd seen before. The single standout characteristic of the artifact that could be seen, even from afar, was an elaborate and quite decorative etching of an eye. It looked alive, almost as if it was casting its malevolent stare through the crowd in front of the platform. From everything that I expected the depths diviners to be, what I saw before me wasn't even remotely as dramatic. There was a kind of calm among them that was the opposite of what was said on the news of their crimes. Until, that is, the sound intensified, and a little smirk appeared on Varga's lips. Muffled, and from a distance, I heard Bellini's voice again.
No! No, don't, Zoltan! You must not release it! The rift must remain closed!
Hearing Bellini's screams snapped me out of my daze. She was still alive, and in need of help, which I couldn't deny her since doing that would have pretty much forfeited my paycheck. I unholstered my gun, checked and loaded it, and then stepped toward the bend where I saw the men take Bellini previously. There was a feeling of increasing tension and tightness around my chest, which at first I brushed off as fear. But the tension kept increasing until I was almost unable to breathe. With every step forward, I had less and less energy to move, and I had to press myself against the walls of the warehouse just to be able to stand up straight. As my fingers touched the cold surface, I felt something odd. It was as if the entire wall was vibrating at a low frequency. Suddenly, I realized that the dirt under my feet felt the same. The sound, the chatter, or the hum that was coming out of the artifact had increased tenfold and was influencing the entire space around it. Eventually, I managed my way to the back of the warehouse where I found Bellini bound to a chair. This time, she was happy to see me.
Blake, hurry! We must stop him!
Let's get you out of here first. Isn't anyone guarding you? Where did they go?
Back inside to witness the rift opening and the creature releasing from its prison.
The answer shocked me into silence. I wasn't sure if she was mad or if I was for coming here alone. As soon as her feet were untied, Bellini got out of the chair and bolted toward the entrance of the warehouse. I staggered behind her slowly because I still felt the strange tension in my chest. "Bellini! Stop! My car is just there! That's where we need to get to!" She stopped and turned abruptly, looking at me dead in the eyes. "Did you not understand what I told you? You've barely said anything. The artifact is an ancient device that keeps the creature inside its cage. It stabilizes the force field so it can never cross back into any reality. It is currently being held between the innumerable dimensions in which the Earth exists. The planet itself keeps it from being pulled apart from forces far beyond our comprehension." I didn't understand what this woman was talking about and couldn't understand why I even got myself into this situation. Cheaters and thieves were my line of business. What was I even doing there? How did I let my greed and curiosity get the better of me? Oh, I should have listened to Joey. All of a sudden, the eerie sound stopped. There was a moment of silence, of stillness. I looked up above Bellini, above the warehouse, and gasped. I'm not sure if I could even describe what I saw as a monster. A giant tentacle had pierced through the ceiling of the warehouse, reaching 10 times as high as the building itself into the air. I couldn't contain a scream that felt like it had taken all of the oxygen out of my lungs, leaving a burning sensation to linger in its wake. Suddenly, massive eyes were looking down at me with some kind of alien intention that I couldn't interpret. One after another, more tentacles burst through the warehouse as the sound of screaming came from inside. Each limb was covered with malevolent eyes just like the one on the artifact. I prayed none of them would look in my direction. It's too late. I looked back down at her and tried meeting her gaze, wanting to ask what was happening because I couldn't believe it. But neither I nor she could speak. She was staring off into the distance toward the city. Her eyes were wide open in horror. "Too late," she mouthed, without sound. I finally turned to see what she was seeing. The city was almost fully visible beyond the long road that led up to the warehouse. There was an ocean of eyeing tentacles between the buildings, slithering slimily over cars and people. Waving high above the skyline were the bigger ones, which would soar even higher, then would smash like thunderous waves down upon it. I couldn't hear the screams from the people caught in the madness, but it felt like I could. I imagined it, horrific and desperate. But there was hope. Beyond the terrible sight of redacted being leveled by beings beyond comprehension, little specks could be seen approaching, like little dragonflies hovering over water. "The military! Finally!" I yelped, but Bellini just shook her head. She knew what was coming. That much she had told me back in my office a few months ago. Even if I didn't fully understand at the time and thought she was being overly dramatic, she had seen this before. She knew the consequences of releasing the gargantuan beings from their prison were never simple. Even if they could be stopped and put back, the lives of those who had survived were never going to be the same. If anything, because of the intolerable secret that everyone would have to keep. Before I could even ask Bellini what the creatures were and how they came to be in their prison, she was gone. The warehouse was stormed via land and air by the military. At first, I was happy to see them shooting and hacking at the giant tentacles that could pancake us all in a heartbeat. Salvation, I thought. But soon I realized that the attack wasn't solely directed toward the creatures. The soldiers were ruthless. They mercilessly shot and hacked away at both human and alien limbs. I suspected that the same thing was happening in the city. I'm not sure which rampage was worse. Varga was screaming from inside. It sounded like gibberish, but the eyeing tentacles seemed to respond to it, turning back down toward the warehouse and zeroing in on him. The odd sound came back. The tension and the vibration were going through everything around me, through me. I felt sick and puked all over myself from the intensity of what I felt physically. After a few moments, when I finally felt able to move again without puking or falling over, I peered back inside the warehouse. Varga was now facing off with the soldiers, who managed to get close to him. He looked savage, terrifying, almost inhuman. All around him were the tentacles that he seemed to be controlling. It's over, I said to myself. There wasn't any hope. What can these mere humans do against beings that were quite literally out of this world? I was wrong. Suddenly, a thunderous boom came from the city. Then another one. Third, fourth. It kept going. I glanced back and saw that the skyline of Redacted was burning. The dragonfly-looking helicopters were dropping bombs on the city. All of those people. Everyone I knew was trapped between monster and flame, scurrying amongst the buildings or hiding wherever they could. That's at least how I imagined it was on the streets. From where I was standing, the battle looked like that of minuscule bugs fighting giant octopuses over and in an ocean of blazing buildings. Varga's screaming caught my attention again, and I looked back inside the warehouse again. I was gripping the sides of the glassless window, my fingers bleeding where I had caught them on the shards of broken glass. A single shot echoed loudly over the hum of the artifact, and Varga dropped like a stone. Within a few seconds, a flurry of soldiers pushed toward his body, attacking the tentacles that were trying to protect the corpse. I think the soldiers were trying to get to the artifact, but I didn't stick around to see. The second I saw an opportunity to escape, I sprinted toward my car and disappeared out of there, leaving none the wiser of my presence in the mess. I rode away without looking back. And that was the last time I heard the names Bellini or Varga ever again. Like most of the inhabitants of Redacted, I was driven out of the city. All of us who managed to live through the night are now left to fend for ourselves as we try to start anew with a story of a catastrophic event that wiped an entire city off the face of any and all maps. Just like that village in Italy in the 70s. For the time being, I remain in Boston, where Joey has offered me lodgings in his family's home. As a police officer, he was notified in time to evacuate the city before everything went down. However, I don't know how long he and I will be allowed to live with this secret. I fear we are putting his brother in danger, and that we will have to go on the run to make sure that the truth remains out there. So, to whoever finds this cassette tape, listens to it, and takes my account of the November events as fact and not fiction, may God help you. This isn't over just yet. Not while the artifact still exists. I can only speculate that it is now in the hands of the military. Digitalization of cassette tape 18/931 dated 12/15/1989 complete. Digitalization dated 5/10/2089. To be archived under case file Terra Crypt. Last known residence of subject Blake, Cybill, P.I. Not in database. Declared deceased, 12/31/1996. Body never recovered. Hey, sci-fi horror fans. It's Carrie Dravlik. Thanks for tuning in. If you enjoyed this story, make sure to give it a thumbs up. Thank you to all our official members of the channel. Your support means a lot to us. Craving another scary tale? Click on that video on your screen. Until next time, everyone. And remember, stay cosmic.